al-mashwiya. Sometimes he would eat roasted lamb, and sometimes he would eat melon with fresh dates. So al-batikh, the rutab. So he had watermelon and fresh dates. And sometimes he would eat al-halwa. So he had like sweets around him. So he says that the Prophet ﷺ just looked around and whatever was their food, he was happy with it. You put, subhanAllah, imagine the Prophet ﷺ comes to visit your house. He asks, what do you have to eat? All we have is some vinegar. That's good. Bring me some vinegar. Bring me just something to dip in. Like, he didn't care, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he was wearing. He wasn't really thinking about what he was eating. He wasn't thinking about what he was riding. قَالَ يَأْخُذُ الْقُوتِ. He would take, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what was necessary just to live. وَيُبْذِلُ الْفَضْلِ. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would give away what was extra. So anytime he looked around, he wore what he needed to wear, he rode what he needed to ride, he ate what he needed to eat, and then he gave away what was extra. And he says, وَيَتْرُكُ مَا لَا يَحْتَاجُ إِلَيْهِ. The Prophet ﷺ never, or he left off that which he did not need. وَلَا يَتَكَلَّفُ فَوْقَ مِقْدَارِ الْحَاجَةِ. And he would only take what was absolutely necessary to keep himself sustained, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, he was never thinking about extra or hoarding or being greedy. Like, if he had anything, a bite extra, he gave it away, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Any extra cloth, he gave it away, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And here's the last line, which seems out of place if you're not reading carefully, but it's actually very beautiful. قال ولا يغضب لنفسه ولا يدع الغضب لربه عز وجل. I'm going to read that line very slowly. ولا يغضب لنفسه. He never got mad for himself. ولا يدع الغضب لربه. But he never left off anger for his Lord. Alright, what does that mean? The Prophet ﷺ never used to, وَمَنْ تَقَمَ لِنَفْسِهِ قَطْ. He never avenged himself. He wouldn't get angry. Like, people would disrespect him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he didn't care. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu has that narration where he says that a man comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he's at the top of the world. And he starts grabbing the Prophet ﷺ, he had a cloak. And again, the Prophet ﷺ wore whatever was given to him. So sometimes an ambassador comes from Yemen and gives the Prophet ﷺ this beautiful suit. Okay, this is nice. He wears it. And then sometimes he wears a garment that's all stitched up. So he was wearing a nice cloak from Yemen, or from Najran. And Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu says this Bedouin comes up to him and he lunges at the Prophet ﷺ, he grabs the cloak to the point that he starts like choking the Prophet ﷺ. He left marks on his neck. And he says, "A'tani mimma a'taka Allah, a'tani mimma a'taka Allah. Give me from what Allah gave you, give me from what Allah gave you." He said the Prophet ﷺ took it off, he gave it to him, he said, "Anas, take him to Baytul Mal, give him some extra money. Go take care of the man." And he's like, what? Right? So for himself, he was so simple. He didn't used to get mad about things, like the petty things that bother people, like someone who didn't address him in a certain way, or someone who didn't walk in a certain way around him, or whatever it is. Like, he was so indifferent to matters of this world. But he was perfecting constantly matters of character. And that's the thing that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ is paying attention to, the pace that he walks, to the way that he's looking at you when you speak to him, to listening to you carefully, attentively. All of these different characteristics, he's mastering them. But he's indifferent to matters of this world. But when it came to Allah, and that's the thing, when someone transgressed the boundaries of Allah, when someone else was disrespected, when someone else was taken advantage of, then the Prophet ﷺ never let that go. Remember, he was talking about, 2 nights ago we were talking about this, that Ibn Hazm rahimahullah says that, I never was a deceitful person or an envious person, so I don't really praise myself for that, because Allah just put that in my tabi'ah. My nature is, I didn't have it in me to cheat people even when I wasn't religious. It was just a lowly quality, so I don't praise myself for that. Someone might just be shy in their nature. They might just be someone who doesn't get angry in their nature. But he's saying that, look, the Prophet ﷺ for himself never got mad. Easy going. And usually the more important you get, the less tolerance you have for people supposedly infringing on your space and your importance. That's why when you get richer, you expect better service. You get more important, you earn a little bit of a title before your name, then you expect people to act a certain way around you. The Prophet ﷺ mastered position, honor. all that was petty to him. But when it came to Allah, when it came to other people being wronged, the Prophet ﷺ never let it go. The smallest thing, as we said, even the joke about Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu's legs, like if you mock someone in his presence, he would not let it go. He would turn red, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, if you made fun of someone in his presence, or if you talked down to someone in his presence, which shows you that this was coming from a place of virtue, not just some sort of circumstantial personality where he just adopts to the scenario that's around him.
SubhanAllah, when I'm looking at what the Prophet ﷺ used to do, what comes to my mind, the difference between us and the Prophet ﷺ in regards to what we wear, what we eat, what we drive, we ride, and all these things and so on, is understanding the Prophet ﷺ. He told us very clearly that كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب أو عابر سبيل. Be in this dunya, like live this life as if you're a stranger or just passing through. Like you're not staying for too long. That's what it means. So therefore, when we look at the Prophet ﷺ's, food and clothes and rides, they were just means to reach a different destination, higher destination. For us, it becomes the destination itself. Like what we wear, what we eat, what we ride, had become that destination. People work so hard, making so much money, holding so much stuff. Why? Because the possession of this particular shoe, this particular car, this particular cuisine, or eating this place or that restaurant, all these things have become, unfortunately for many people, their destination itself. Like, I work so hard for this, so I deserve to do that. However, let's be balanced over here. The Prophet ﷺ was asked, when a man came to the Prophet, قال يا رسول الله الرجل يحب أن يكون ثوبه حسن ونعله حسنا. Like, I like to have nice shoes and nice clothes. Is that also considered arrogance? The Prophet said, no, that's not arrogance. There's nothing wrong with that. And he directly said, look, the meaning of arrogance is بطر الحق وغمط الناس. When you reject the truth and you look down upon people, that's what arrogance is. But at the same time, we look how the Prophet lived his life. His food was only sustenance, because the destination is higher than that. His clothes just to do the business, the job for it, to cover up and go to make it, ibadah and salah and so on. So brand names, fancy stuff, colors, not big deal. If it's available, he would wear it. If it's not, and so on. Like the Prophet one time he was seen wearing a nice, beautiful red suit. And suit in the culture of the Arabs back then meaning two pieces, such as, for example, loincloth and a shirt on top of it or something like that. So he was once seen wearing a nice, beautiful red suit that had white stripes. And the Sahabi he was describing the Prophet ﷺ in a beautiful moon, full moon. He goes, I was looking at the Prophet ﷺ, look at the moon, look at the Prophet ﷺ, look at the moon, look at the Prophet ﷺ again. I said, Wallahi, I saw the Prophet ﷺ was much more beautiful than the moon. It's full night. Like he's seeing that. So again, it's not haram to wear nice and to dress nice and to have a nice ride and so on. But it shouldn't be the destination. Our heart should not be attached to the shoes we wear, to the clothes we put on, to the perfume you own, to the car you drive, to the food that you eat. It shouldn't be attached to it. Our food should be just sustenance on the journey to Al-Akhirah. Ulama even told us something about when it comes to seeking knowledge. He said, as a talib al-ilm, as a student of knowledge, you have to be quick in three things. Number one, in eating. Number two, in writing. Number three, in walking between errands. Like you don't have time. You don't have time to eat and sit down and have a fancy meal and all that stuff. That's why, if you look at Zad al-Ma'ad ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, describing how the Prophet ﷺ used to eat. Some of the description of the Prophet ﷺ eating, he wouldn't be sitting down on the ground, he would be crouching. So when you crouch down and you eat, what does that even mean? That means it's not going to take 15 minutes or 20 minutes to finish the meal. It's going to be just a few minutes. Which means eat and move on. We have things that are much more serious and important than just eating a fancy meal. So when you look at the Prophet ﷺ, the big difference is people, they need to understand all these worldly things, if you make them a target that you need to hit, put them a destination to arrive at, if you make this has its own merit in your life, then you're going to start losing the meaning of that journey in itself, unfortunately. But be genuine.
I wanted to just comment, if you don't mind, just on the Prophet ﷺ as well. Most people are very indifferent to their matters of the religion. Like, how do you pray? you learn how to pray. Maybe you grew up, you saw people praying this way, but you're not really like paying attention to where your hands are, what you're saying, like how you're doing the different things. Like you learn how to pray a certain way, you just kind of went with the flow. When it comes to matters of the religion, it's just indifference, aloof almost, like whatever, right? The Prophet ﷺ treated the world like that. And the thing is that he mastered it ﷺ in a way that he wasn't indifferent to people's circumstances. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ noticed things from people that no one else knew. So like, someone comes in the masjid and the Prophet ﷺ says, stand up and pray 2 rak'ahs. Because he wanted people, one of the reasons for that, the context was he wanted people to see the situation of that person. Go give that person sadaqah. The Prophet ﷺ noticed the woman that used to clean the masjid that was missing one night. But when it came to his own worldly affairs, like it was as if he was like, yeah, whatever, indifferent. And there are 2 incidents that come to mind, subhanAllah, that really illustrate or highlight that perspective and how he wanted to shift perspective. The first one is when the Prophet ﷺ was giving khutbah, he was looking extremely nice and he's wearing really nice clothes and people were just admiring him, like, man, he looks incredible, right? Like, beautiful suit. The ambassador just came back and gave him something. The Prophet ﷺ put it on for Jum'ah. And the Prophet ﷺ notices that people are admiring it. And he says, you all see this? And you think this is all that? He says, Wallahi, the handkerchief of Sa'd, radiallahu anhu in Jannah, Sa'd who was a martyr, is better than this whole thawb. Like just that, the handkerchief that you blow your nose with, what Allah gave him in Jannah, that is better than this whole thing. Like don't get too impressed by this stuff, guys. Like I'm wearing it, but it's just vanity at the end of the day. On the other hand, you have the time when Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu walked in the famous incident, and the Prophet ﷺ was rising from his sleep. And Umar radiallahu anhu came with a very serious issue. But when he saw the Prophet ﷺ getting up in his bed, I mean, this is the most powerful man in the world, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most important man in the world. And his bed is made of branches, and his pillow is a leather-stuffed pillow. And the hujurat of the Prophet ﷺ was no bigger than this space right here. Each one of the hujurat of the Prophet ﷺ. Tiny space. And he gets up, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Umar radiallahu anhu sees all the marks on his back. And Umar starts to cry. The Prophet ﷺ says, why are you crying, O Umar? He says, Ya Rasulullah, I've seen the palaces of Rome and Caesar. I've seen the palaces of Kisra and Persia. And he says, you're so much more deserving of that. And look, the Prophet ﷺ is like, I'm not noticing, I'm not paying attention to this stuff. The Prophet ﷺ is telling Umar, aren't you pleased? They have this world, but we have the hereafter. I don't care. You're crying over me. I'm not crying over myself. I'm not feeling sorry for myself because Allah has given us something far greater to pursue of the hereafter. So it just shows you that indifference that he has to the world, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's why his character was so perfect, because he was focused on his religion, focused on his character, not focused on the things that usually distract people of vanity.
No. So Imam Ibn Hazm rahimahullah, he moves on to another point right now, saying, قال الثبات الذي هو صحة العقل والثبات الذي هو اللجاج مشتبهان اشتباها لا يفرق بينهما إلا عارف بكيفية الأخلاق. Because the perseverance which consists of keeping one's word and the perseverance which is nothing but obstinacy are so alike that they can only be told apart by someone who knows what different characters are like. What he means by that, he said, look, you find some people who are very tough and very actually strong in terms of standing for what they believe in. He says, look, when people stand for what they believe in, one of 2 things. Some, they stand on for the truth, and some, they only just there for just to be argumentative. So sometimes, when you have people, and no matter how much you try, they're very firm because they believe in what they stand for. Standing for justice, standing for the right thing. In regard to what happened right now, for example, subhanAllah, in our time, in Gaza, Palestine, around the world, those who know the truth, they stand for, and they're willing to sacrifice everything, for the truth, right? Versus people who know that they're lying. They're hiding, the truth behind that facade that they come up with right now, being just politically correct and so on. Because look, some people just do that for the sake of argument. But others, they stand for justice, because only someone with good character can tell the difference between two. Like nowadays, subhanAllah, you see media, right? It's so shocking, surprisingly shocking, when you realize how many people are falling for this falsehood in the news and false media and all these politicians coming out with these false arguments and excuses and so on. It's just like weird. It's really like, wow. Do they really believe in what they're saying? Now some of you could be shocked. Do they really believe in that? Don't they see that what they're doing is just the damage they're causing, subhanAllah? But it's unbelievable because only someone with sound character can tell the difference between someone who's lying about it and someone who's being genuine and truthful about that. وقال رحمه الله تعالى, the one who's doing it, of course, for falsehood, قال فعله الفاعل نصرا لما نشب فيه وقد لاح الفساد. He only shows that kind of bravery or start with this such a straight face in this kind of argument, knowing deep inside how false his argument is. And the only thing he does, he says basically, is trying to push so hard as much as possible, like basically making his voice so loud, making his voice so loud to hide that falsehood behind it. And even in the Arabic language, we say sometimes تعلم بالصوت, which means if you would like to win an argument, speak louder. If you speak louder, people they think that you're really serious. Oh my God, yeah, because they're loud, they must be actually so serious, they're so passionate about it. Because that passion can't be just for falsehood, it's not going to be true.
Right. So it's like he's saying that loud people are usually masking emptiness inside of them, right? People that are making a display always are usually masking a major void in their lives, right? So if they're empty on the inside, they're overcompensating with the presentation on the outside. Again, this whole thing is about mastering the self and finding authenticity in yourself and pursuing greatness and not looking towards these things.
So he continues to say, look, hadd al-aql, as a result of that, how do you know the people who really have good sense of mind, really, versus those who are just being ridiculous in their arguments? قال حد العقل استعمال الطاعات والفضائل وهذا الحد ينطوي في اجتناب المعاصي والرذائل. He goes, look, the meaning of having good sense means having good reason and the faculty of mind is defined as the practice of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the practice of piety and virtues. This definition also implies avoidance of rebellion and vice. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, وَقَالُوا لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. Speaking about the people of Jahannam, when they're going to be saying that if we, they will say, if we had listened, if we had understood, which means we had that sound mind, that good sense, we would not be among the damned in Jahannam. So what he says, this is how to be smart. You know you're smart if you can tell this is haram, stay away from it. This is good, I will do it. That's what makes you smart, because you have the good sense of reality. This life is vanity. It's going to come to an end. There's a better life after that. So you would hold yourself, of course, from going into what your desires take you down, to that which is keep you superior, inshallah, in this dunya, and hopefully, inshallah, in the akhirah. Then he says, وَحَدُّ الْحَمَقِ. Stupidity, he says, is defined as the practice of disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the practice of vice. That's his definition for it. The really stupid person is the one who wastes his life, through going into the haram and not protecting the wajibat and the fard and the halal. Why is that? Because again, and his point of reference is different than what's in this world. Because in this world, people that tell you, hey, you aim high, but for what? Worldly matters. And as a result, they will justify for you every possible means to get you there. Halal, haram, wrong, right, who cares? But here, we talk about the akhirah as being the target of it. He goes, look, the stupid one who doesn't recognize that, doesn't realize that they're wasting such a precious commodity like Jannah for just a fleeting moment in this dunya. He goes, those are the stupid ones. And then he goes the third category, قال وحد السخف هو العمل والقول بما لا يحتاج إليه في دين ولا دنيا ولا حميد خلق مما ليس معصية ولا طاعة. Because in the third category, so there's the smart ones, there's the stupid ones. What could be the middle right now? قال السخيف, which means the ridiculous ones. Those are so ridiculous, basically. What do? Because they get themselves busy doing things that won't benefit them in dunya or akhirah. Like it's not haram what they're doing, but it doesn't bring them any benefit in their dunya or their akhirah. And frankly, in time like ours, that's the most manifest thing, unfortunately. Like people, they don't want to be serious about, for example, working, about advancing in life, about accomplishing. Everybody wants to take shortcuts in this dunya. Right. Shortcuts has become the thing that everybody is desiring to have, versus really leaving a legacy and something that is meaningful and stuff. So he defines people to 3 categories. Number 1, the smart ones, who know that their destination is Jannah, so therefore they're going to have to busy themselves doing good, stay away from bad. And then there's those who are ridiculous. They're just not doing things. They're busy but not productive at all. And the 3rd category, those who are, they call them hamqa, or foolish and stupid. Those who are wasting their life in meaningless things.
So Sheikh, the next part of this chapter, so you gotta see it like he's talking about the graduation of poor qualities, right? So earlier on, if you remember a few nights ago, the idea that if you let your desires own you, then eventually you'll do anything you can to fulfill those desires. So you can develop a predator, you can become Sibari, you can become like a predatory beast where you're willing to hurt people even to fulfill those desires. The root cause was that you didn't tame your love for those desires in the first place. Here, to sort of build off what Sheikh Yasser is talking about, a person who's aimless in life and who's always looking, a Saqif is just someone who looks for shortcuts, eventually is going to try to find ways to not just game the system, but to cheat the system, right? So how do I just get around? How do I find social mobility without actually putting in the hard work and being known for things that I actually attained in life? So this is where he comes to وَأَمَّا إِحْكَامُ أَمْرِ الدُّنْيَا وَالتَّوَدُّدُ إِلَى النَّاسِ بِمَا وَافَقَهُ. He says, as for mastering the affairs of this world and winning people's affection through whatever pleases them. So basically people pleasing. So Ibn Hazm hates people pleasers. Like it's so clear in his books, like the man hates, because that's what he found cowardice. He found like the shuyukh of his time just sucking up to the political class, and the political class sucking up to those that were higher than them, and like people like that used to make all these bold statements about the government, but then once the government showed up at the door, they just started sucking up to these government officials. He hated people pleasers, and that was the number 1 quality that turned him off. So he's saying that as for these people that are people pleasers, right? And he said they're just always looking to what they can do to make the right person happy so that they can get ahead. وصلحت عليه حال المتودد من باطل أو غيره أو عيب أو ما عداه والحيل في إماع المال وبعد الصوت وتسبيب الجاه بكل ما أمكن من معصية ورذيلة. He says that as for a person who will do whatever he can to please people, whether that's using falsehood or even displaying like lowly traits, lowly qualities, or using trickery, deception so that you can increase your money, or raising your profile, or gaining the status through doing something of no meaning. Like this is like spot on when he's talking about the day. People that get famous for garbage or get famous for nothing, right? Like building a profile, building fame around absolute stupidity. Willing to do whatever you can to get famous, willing to do whatever you can to get ahead. The attention economy. So he's talking about the attention economy in his time. Like, what if you're trying to sell a version of yourself, you'll keep on doing something more ridiculous, clickbaity, the next level, the next level, the next level, whatever it is. You've got to take it further with the joke. You've got to take it further with your social media. You've got to take it further with your social circles. Whatever it is that's going to get more eyes on you. He says that even if you succeed technically, he says this is actually a really dumb person. Okay, this is not a person who we would call فَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ عَقْلًا. Like this, you're actually not as smart as you think you are. He says وَلَقَدْ كَانَ الَّذِينَ صَدَقَهُمُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى فِي أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ وَأَخْبَرَنَا تَعَالَى بِأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ سَائِسِينَ لِدُنْيَاهُمْ مُتَمَرِّسِينَ لِأَمْوَالِهِمْ مُدَارِينَ لِمُلُوكِهِمْ حَافِظِينَ لِرِيَاسَتِهِمْ. He says that the people that Allah called dumb in the Quran, that Allah said have no brain, right, are people that were really good at managing their money. They were really good at getting famous. They were really good at getting ahead in this world. But at the same time, they pleased their rulers, or they preserved their leadership by feeding their followers with certain things. He said these are the same people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called people of no intellect, people who actually don't think. Even though if you saw them in society, you would say these are people that got ahead. By the way, I want to put this out there because I think sometimes we misread the seerah. Abu Jahl, what was his name? What was his name before Abu Jahl? What was his nickname? Abu al-Hakam, the father of wisdom. the father of wisdom. His name was Amr ibn Hisham, but his nickname was the father of wisdom. But through Islam, he became Abu Jahl, the father of ignorance. Like, what an insult that you went from being known for your wisdom to actually being known for your foolishness. Abu Lahab was known to be a really smart man. Like, he knew how to make his money. Why did Abu Lahab oppose the Prophet ﷺ? Abu Lahab, by the way, used to dress nicely. He used to look good. He's not like this ugly personality that you know. Abu Lahab he came off as like a really smart, well-to-do, wealthy, educated man. And that's why when the Prophet ﷺ talked about turning all the idols into monotheism, that we believe in one God instead of all these idols, he said that's bad for business. You're taking all of these idols. We make money off of these idols. You're taking all of these aliha and making them one ilah. You're messing it up for us. It's bad money. It's bad for business. All he could think about was a financial lens. And Allah is saying these are actually the dumbest people in the world. They don't see how far they've actually gone. So he says that, he continues, he says, لَكِنْ هَذَا الْخُلُقْ, that this characteristic is not intellect. لَكِنْ يُسَمَّى الدَّهَاء. It's being sly, cunning. We talked about daha in a previous lesson. Someone that's basically just really, really cunning. They know how to play games. They know how to cheat people. So they're smart. Allah gave them the potential to be smart and to be intellectual, but they use those wits to actually cheat people. They use those wits to mess with the system. They use those wits to present a certain thing about themselves. That's not true. قَالَ وَضِدُّهُ الْغَفْلَةُ وَالسَّلَامُ. And the opposite of that is heedlessness or innocence. Heedlessness or innocence. Right? The opposite character of someone who is described as having daha, someone who's cunning, is someone that's either ignorant or just innocent. Like, they don't know how to play the game. And he continues finally and he says, وَأَمَّا إِذَا كَانَ السَّعْيُ فِيمَا ذَكَرْنَا تَصَاوُنًا. He says that as for if a person was to avoid these paths out of dignity, وَأَنَفًا, out of dignity and out of self-respect, فَهُوَ يُسَمَّى الْحَزْمِ. Then that's a person who's called Hazm, which is his name, right? Resolute. And he says the opposite of that is a person who's completely lost. So again, the point is he's saying that, look, let me put it to you this way, what he's actually putting out here. If you hate someone that's evil and that got ahead with their evil and that gamed the system and that cheated people and became really successful in a worldly sense, and the only thing that stopped you from getting there was that you just didn't know how to play the game right, that just means you're ignorant. But if you avoided getting ahead through deceits and cheating people, if you avoided doing that out of self-respect and dignity, then that's what hazm is, that's what resoluteness is, that's what a praiseworthy characteristic is. Let me put it to you this way. I look at the Prophet ﷺ again. Amr ibn Sa'sa', he looked at the Prophet ﷺ from a pure leadership quality. He said, I could eat the Arabs with this man. What did he mean by that? It's like the Prophet ﷺ is such a natural leader. He's so magnetic. He's so good at he was analyzing him from a pure leadership perspective. He wasn't a Muslim. But he said, look, if I can make a deal with him, cut a deal with him, he said, I could eat the Arabs with this man. He's so smart. He's such a great leader. So he told the Prophet ﷺ, look, I'll support you on the condition that we inherit leadership from you, that you give us tribal superiority. Notice that the Prophet ﷺ was weak at that point. He was vulnerable. This is in the Meccan phase. He's looking for anyone to take him in, ﷺ, to allow him to preach openly without being persecuted. Amr ibn Sa'sa', he looks at the Prophet ﷺ and he sees a desperate man, but he says he's a great leader. He has all of the qualities of a great leader. He says, I could use this man and I could eat all of the Arabs. And the Prophet ﷺ responded, even in his weakest point, and he said, what? Al-amru lillah yurithuha man yasha wa al-'aqibatu lil-muttaqin. He said, this affair belongs to God. Allah will give it to whom He wants. And victory belongs to the pious. Think about what it takes to say that in those moments. Like they're trying to, وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ. They wish you would compromise, they would willingly compromise on their qualities, right? On all of their principles. So they thought that they could bully the Prophet ﷺ into submission. They thought that they could bully him into accepting certain concessions. And they would compromise every element of their religion. They'd compromise every element of their culture. And the Prophet ﷺ, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ,